Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's Writers Chat. This is the place writers like to gather each week, and we talk about all things writing for writers and by writers. So we're really welcome to see everybody here this week. We got a whole crew in the chat room, so I'm excited to see a lot of familiar names and a couple new faces, so we're glad and welcome. And if you're watching the replay, thank you again for taking the time to feed your writing skill and hopefully feed your faith too. We are a Christian-based group, so glad to see everybody here today. I am co-host Jean Wise. I'm joined today by Johnny Alexander, who is one of our other co-hosts, and our motley crew, especially our behind-the-scenes crew. You guys don't know how much we love these three, Melissa and Norma and Jan. They do an enormous amount of behind the scenes work that gets this going every Tuesday. So special thank you for them. And we asked Norma to kind of help lead the discussion. So I'm going to turn it over to her. And I think the plan is that we're going to do a little talking about some of the things that she's going to bring up. And then we're going to invite all of you in the chat room back on, maybe a little bit early this time, and to share some of the answers you might have to some of the questions. So thank you again to everybody. And Norma, you're on. So we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. And yes, those of you that are not on right now, think about answers to these questions as we talk, because we'd love to hear your story too. I thought it would be great to have an episode of hearing writers' stories of how they began to write, how God called them, and maybe a particular verse or a particular situation that God used to make it real clear this was his plan for you. So that's what we're going to do. I've asked Jan if she would mind being my first guinea pig and my first experiment. And Jan, how did you know, how young were you when you knew that God had called you to write?
I wasn't very young at all. I was 56 when God told me I was going to be writing. I'm an associate in ministry, and my last call, Pastor said I had the sermon on Christmas Eve for the families to aim my sermon at the kids. And I told him I didn't think that would work. Our kids weren't used to sitting through sermons. So I said, I have a book a pastor wrote. Could I share this and have a mic on so that the rest of the congregation could hear me? He said, well, you can try it. And so that's what I did. And it went real well. The kids paid attention instead of fidgeting in their seats. And the next year I found another book. Third year I couldn't find a book. I'm going through all kinds of sites, and I sat back and I said, all right, God, what am I doing now? And I haven't found a book that I felt I wanted to read or felt called to read. And he said, you're writing it. And I go, no, I don't know how to do this. I had never in my life thought about being an author. I enjoyed reading, but it wasn't something I ever thought of doing. And he insisted, all right, but I need your help. I don't have any clue what I'm doing. So I started writing, and it just kind of fell in place. It was like he was telling me what to write. And I went through some changes. My daughter helped me a little, and originally it was called That Wonderful Night. And excuse me, it's the story of the Nativity told through the eyes of the innkeeper's daughter. Oh. And the kids, that was the best they ever sat listening to me. And my family was right behind the kids, and they says, I've never seen them sit, especially the one little boy that was always antsy. And so it felt good, I was like, and I just figured that's the end of it. We'll figure out next year. Well, in the back, when I was greeting everyone, several people asked for where they could get the book. They said that was the best one I had read yet. And I thanked them and said, well, hang on, I can go print you a copy because I wrote it this year. And they said, no, you need to get it published. I thought about that for about 5 minutes because I had no clue what any of this was. I didn't know any other authors. Well, God wanted it to go forward. He introduced me to an author through a Hallmark store I used to work at. She introduced me to her publisher and illustrator, and I signed my contract February of 2007. By September, I had all my books and was ready to sell. I had 58 book signings the month of November and December, and almost sold 2,000 books. They were in all kinds of stores and Amazon, everything. And it was just amazing. And the next year, sales dropped because the economy dropped. And then the following year, we moved from Michigan to Florida. And so I didn't have any contacts down here. Was at a store talking to a woman. She introduced me to her pastor's wife, and she introduced me to Word Weavers. So that's how I got started here. And from Word Weavers, Florida Christian Writers Conference, and Kyle's my agent, and I have a series out right now, but we pulled it. They want me to do some more work on it, and then we're going to re-release it. So I'm working on that, and I'm also working on a beginner's quilting book. The proposal's in. I'm just waiting to see what happens with that. So Kyle asked me if I could write it, and I said, if you're asking, I'm writing. We'll see what happens. So,
what an amazing story of God just using us when we least expect it, and how that's just such a great story. I love to see when God calls people that aren't expecting it. Other people aren't expecting it. It's a surprise to everybody, especially the writer, right, Jan?
Absolutely. And then he went and got me involved with Authors Community, and he's got me doing all kinds of stuff there. So
now, what do you mostly write, Jan?
Well, I started out just writing for children. The series is Bible characters through the ages, and two kids build a time travel machine out of a refrigerator box. And they're telling the stories of the different Bible characters. And I get to learn the history to add to the stories for the kids. And so I study each character at the different points in time. And kids' reactions have been really good. It's been fun.
That's great. That's great. Excuse me. Thanks for sharing, Jan. I appreciate that. What a great story.
Thank you.
Johnny, would you tell us your story. How did God call you, and how did you know for sure that's what you were supposed to do?
I could probably spend like all the rest of the day just talking. It's like I have to really just, what do I want to share? Because there's just so much. But I've been kind of telling myself stories for about as long as I can remember. I mean, when I was even very little, there was a big tree outside my window, and I was convinced that a wild cat, like a cougar, lived in that tree and spent every night on the branch right outside my window. And there was a monster under my bed, but it only came out at night. So I would leap from the doorway of my bedroom to the bed. And I could make this flying leap because then I was safe. But if my toes got near the bed at night, only at night, the monster would get my toes. And I like she had alligators under her bed. So yeah, I mean, I just was always telling these stories to myself. And I remember when I was about 9 or 10, which is actually kind of old, I guess, for this, but I don't know what to tell you. I read a lot, I just love to read. I was going for a walk with my mom and my grandma down where my grandma lived, which was in a holler, an Ohio holler in southern Ohio. So this long country lane. And, it's the rutted gravel and all that kind of stuff. And I just raced ahead, and I came back, and I told them this fantastical story about seeing fairies underneath the leaves and all this kinds of stuff. And they didn't believe me. And I remember so clearly being so confused by that. because I knew I was just telling them a story, but I didn't know why they didn't believe me, because to me, that story really could be true. Even at 9 or 10, I believed it could be true. So anyway, that's just kind of like all of that. I don't know that I ever felt a specific call from God to write, that I could ever just pinpoint this is the time. But as part of my writing journey, I put those dreams away for a long, long time, and because they were so scary for me, I was afraid, I didn't want to fail. And maybe it was just my dream, but I knew a lot of people had that dream and it didn't work out for them. And so, I read all the writing books and all that. I would write little sketches of things, but never really did too much until NaNoWriMo. That was like a really big deal and a really big changing point for me. And then going to the Florida Christian Writers Conference where I met Jeannie. And yes. And so that first year I had a room by myself, but the second, third years that we went, well, several years, Jeannie and I have been roommates. So 2007 was my first year to go there. 2008 or 9, I'm not sure what year it was, but Jeannie and I made great roommates because she gets up early and goes to breakfast, and then I get up and I can get ready by myself. And I was doing just this little tiny devotional, and I was just reading Psalms. So I had just taken this little, New Testament Bible with the Psalms and Proverbs in the back. And I was on Psalm 31, and I read this. So the first part of this verse sounds a little scary, but it's the second part that really hit me that day. It's Psalm 31:8. You have not given me into the hands of the enemy, but have set my feet in a spacious place. And I think I've talked about this before. Something about that, you have set my feet in a spacious place, just really spoke to me. And I thought, this is going to happen. I don't know how it's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen, but God is going to set my feet in a spacious place. This is a promise for me. And so, I was serious about writing then, but then I think I just became even more serious about it. And it still took, it was 2008 or 9. It was 2013 before my debut novel was published. But during that time, I was getting affirmations. I was getting, Jeannie won the Writer of the Year award at Florida Christian College in 2008, I believe. And I won in 2009. And I won the Genesis contest. So I was getting affirmations that kept me going even during those years when I was still waiting for God for this promise to unfold. So, okay. Yeah. I'll let someone else talk now.
What do you write, Johnny?
Oh, well, that's kind of an interesting thing because, when I thought, oh, God's setting my feet in a spacious place, I'm going to be this, fantabulous author and be best-selling and all this kind of stuff. And that is not the case. But, I've hit the bestseller list a couple times, the CBA and ECPA, but I write in lots of genres, which is not what I expected that to mean. So my spacious place is writing in, I've written historicals, contemporary romances, contemporaries, cozy mysteries, and an Amish novel.
That add a children's book and you'll have covered the spectrum, I think, minus the thriller.
I am going to write a suspense. That's on my calendar for next year. So yeah.
I would say with all those scary stories from your childhood, you can cougar in the tree or something.
Yeah. There's always some kind of suspense. Even in my other novels, it always seems like I just there's something there because I guess I like to scare myself. I don't know. That was, but they were so real. You guys know, they're so real when you're a kid. It's like, I was just shocked at my mom and my grandma, because I wasn't a kid who lied, that they did not believe me when I told them about the
Oh, that's great. All right, Jean, you're in the hot seat next, Jeannie.
Hot seat. Well, I had a tree too, but outside our house that you could climb in. It was a shorter tree, kind of like how apple trees are, but with a lot of really great branches, and it was a spaceship for me. So, so I took that. So, Johnny, we have that in common, but it didn't lead me to fiction. I mean, nonfiction. Anyway, so that answers your second question pretty quick. But I'm not a fiction reader. But those fairies, I think they're still around even for us.
I do too.
There's a book inside me that wants to bubble up with fairies. So that's future. And that way. I think I've always been a word person, and I have downstairs in our basement in my memory box a a community newspaper that I wrote when I was probably 6 or 7, illustrated it, everything, wrote and reported what was happening in the neighborhood. And I have one of them left. I copied, I distributed them. So I was a newspaper reporter at a very young age. I think I would also like to give tribute to the importance. We were talking in the chat about affirmations, but the important people that affirm our gifts early. I had a 4th grade teacher who was moving away at the end of the year, and she gave me a book of poetry. And she said, "You're a poet. Don't ever forget that." And I always thought that was neat. And the teachers that affirmed us in high school, I was editor for our newspaper, our high school newspaper, and just the teachers that, like I said, would see your gifts and compliment them are so powerful. But I was sitting in church my 16th year singing in youth choir and looked at the candles. We sat behind the altar, kind of behind, and I remember looking at the candles, and I heard God say distinctly, called me. And it was not a writer. It was nursing. And I remember thinking, no. No. No, I don't want to be a nurse. I'm not hearing you right. And I remember saying nursing, and all I heard was a quiet yes. And so I explored that field and fell in love with that vocation. And that was what I did most of my adult life, was a nurse. And when I retired, I was able to retire early because I worked public health in the state of Ohio, which had a great retirement system, at least at that time. So I was able to retire early, and God brought the gift of writing back. So I loved how he completed the circle, and I'll do my quick little testimony on there. It wasn't till after I had met Johnny and we were working on what we wanted to accomplish for that year and that I realized my call was to nurture people through writing and speaking ministry. And the word nurture is also the same root word. I always go back, I'm a word person. Root word for nurse. Yeah. So God has always had me nurturing people in different ways. So that's kind of my identity. So, but I love it that the writing and speaking and blogging and all that has opened so many doors in the second half of life. Second half of life has been wonderful. And so it just, through the word, I am a word person. Through the word, I love the word, and I like playing with words. I love playing with words. I love finding the origin and messing with it. So that's kind of my story as a writer, but on that way. So but I agree with her and fairies. It starts with the fairies.
Isn't it great? The second part of life doesn't have to just be sitting on a rocking chair watching life go by.
Absolutely not. Second half of life has been a more life-giving and positive and a blessing. And I just, I'm just amazed and grateful.
What do you write, Jeannie?
I write mainly nonfiction, a lot of Christian living, spiritual growth. I have a tendency, I focus a lot on helping people discover and explore different spiritual practices that deepen their relationship with God and help lead them to a vibrant, healthy spirituality. So that's the name of the blog, Healthy Spirituality. So it kind of narrowed my niche a little bit into spiritual practices, spiritual growth. So it's sort of area I like that. So
awesome. Okay, Melissa, let's hear your story. How did, my understanding is you've been writing for quite a while. So share with us how you started.
Well, there's so many good stories here, and I found myself relating to little things from each of you. It's neat. And, Johnny, she hit on that imagination from youth, and I definitely had that going for me. I would make up stories as a kid and characters in my mind, and I'd be running through the woods around our house, reenacting these stories in my mind, and the characters would be with me, and we'd be doing all sorts of things, going on all sorts of adventures. And most of this time it was alone by myself, although I'd try to encourage my sister to join me on some adventures. But by the time I became a middle schooler, I thought, I have such a love for stories and writing, and I did have a little bit of an aptitude for it, that maybe this is what I should pursue. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to try to learn how to be a writer. Maybe I'll be a writer and an illustrator and I went all out one time, 7th grade. There was a writing assignment, and I had put my whole heart into this story, and the teacher, gave me an A, said, great job. And then another kid came along and wrote this just mind-boggling story, jaw-dropping, emotional, everything. And I was like, I can't write like that. Maybe I'm just fooling myself. And then there were other things that came along later on, and as a teenager, your emotions are everywhere. And so I kind of just decided, well, maybe I'm not cut out for it. Maybe I need to pursue something else. And so I dropped the dream and I let it go. And, I wrote stories just for fun, for my own pleasure, all the way up through high school. I had the stories that eventually became my current novel in my head, even as a high schooler. But it wasn't until after I came back to Bible college with my husband that God kind of brought the dream back. He revealed a lot of things to me, showed me a lot of grace during that time period that, it was just eye-opening. And one of the things that he brought back to me was the dream to pursue writing again. And so I went whole hog into it. I decided, well, I've always had the fantasy novel thing going. I love speculative fiction, sci-fi, those kind of things. And so I took the ideas I had, I poured them into a fantasy novel and wrote it out. That it would probably be, I started in 2001 and finished it in 2002, but it wasn't working. I was trying to make this fantasy novel jive, and it it just wasn't coming together the way I thought. And at the same time, I had really started to fall back into my love of historical fiction. I was reading Bodie Taney and Francine Rivers, and just loved what they did, and they inspired me. And my mother-in-law came along and was really encouraging me that maybe that's what you should try. And God just kind of opened it up to me when I went back to Bible college that year. And you should be writing. And I thought, okay, well, I'll give it a shot. And I took the fantasy novel and I converted it into a historical fiction. It was, I started researching. I decided I was going to focus on the Middle Ages, because the Middle Ages were my love. I loved everything about that. And so it was either going to be somewhere around the people in Germany or Ireland, because those were background family things. And I thought, I don't know much about those histories. I would love to learn. And so I wanted to put my passion of learning history into my writing. And Ireland won out. So I started researching Irish history and found the Viking era with Brian Boru fit my story to a T. I mean, everything. It was amazing how much it all went together with what I had going. And so I converted it, had it all finished, and by the year 2003, I was ready to go to my first writers' conference. And my mother-in-law helped me to get there, because I wouldn't have been able to afford to go. She offered to pay half of my way to the conference and took me there. And that experience right there was it was a roil of emotions, because here I am. I think that was 2003, so I was in my early 20s, and pregnant with my first child, and the morning sickness hit as soon as we started going in there. And I had a really bad. I mean, I was extremely sick through my pregnancies, and that we got to the conference, and I'm trying to keep it together because this is in Estes Park, so you're going through all those back roads, the canyons, and everything. And I'm like, my mother-in-law gave me a coffee can to take with me, so I could utilize that. We got to the conference, got signed in. I was all trying to suppress the sickness and get into this mode of learning and showing everybody my heartbreaking work of staggering genius, as Randy Manson used to put it. He was even there at the conference, so that was exciting. But everything kind of just fell apart after that. Reality hit me, and I realized just how little I knew. I was interviewing with authors and editors there. I had taken a critique, and everyone was telling me, there's no market for what you have. It's not going to make it. You know, I talked with Tracy Peterson, actually, and she thought that I wanted to submit to Heart Song at the time. I was like, no, I just wanted to know what do you think of this? And so it was just one discouraging thing after another, and I was so sick. At one conference, I had to go run, or one class, I had to go running out. I couldn't make it out the door. I ended up puking in the bushes right outside of the class. It was terrible. And that evening, I went back to my room with my mother-in-law, and I just laid down on my bed looking out the window and just feeling utterly defeated. Like, why am I here? What is the purpose of this? I can't write. I'm fooling myself. And trying to control the nausea and everything, the emotions. I'm getting emotional just thinking about it. And it was raining outside. I remember very clearly, and I'm sitting there thinking, okay, God, is this really from you? Is this where I'm supposed to be? And the rain, I had a view across the parking lot of another lodge right across from us, down on the ground. And there was a guy who came out of his hotel room, his lodge room, and he had a set of bagpipes. And he started playing Amazing Grace right after that, right after I had asked God, is this where I'm supposed to be?
That is amazing.
Right through the rain, I watched him, and he just played it so beautifully. I mean, he had everybody from their rooms, everybody out in the parking lot just mesmerized. They actually invited him to come in and play later on during one of the conference sessions because it was just so beautiful. And it was like, okay, yeah,
Kleenexes, everybody.
Yeah. And so it was like, okay, I hear you, God. I'll keep pursuing it. And the next day, things got better. Everybody was so encouraging to me. I went and spoke with another historical fiction author who gave me good advice, told me, your first draft is probably going to be something you're going to hide in a filing cabinet. It'll never see the light of day, but try. And I thought, no, this first draft maybe, but this book isn't going to go into a filing cabinet. And so from that point on, I set on to let the book grow with me, and I started to learn, pursued meeting other people, getting involved in writers groups, and came to here eventually.
So what has happened with this story, Melissa?
Well, the story has become a series, the Tale of the Clans series. The first book, Rise of Betrayal, is going to be contracted. It's not official yet. I haven't signed the contract. They're still renegotiating, but they are interested, and it's looking like it will be published hopefully this year. So.
Awesome. And all from that bagpipe of Amazing Grace.
Yeah.
Story, Melissa. You need to publish that story. That is so encouraging, and what a blessing. And isn't it great how God gives us nuggets when we're discouraged and ready to just throw in the towel?
Yes.
Hey, Melissa, I think that story could be a chicken soup story.
Oh.
Think about that. If you found the right groupie, the right category.
Yeah.
But I think that is a chicken soup story.
Oh, well, thank you. I'll definitely keep that in mind.
Yes. I too I call myself a late bloomer. I've always enjoyed writing. I love stories. My childhood in the summers, I grew up in Miami, Florida. And as y'all know, it's hot. Mm-hmm. And so in elementary school, we didn't have air conditioning because it wasn't the thing back then. And anyway, I read and read. And I just was an avid reader. In high school, I did some writing and things, and I had a writing speech and debate teacher. I would write speeches and things, and she always encouraged how I wrote and all. But and I had a lot of compliments. Oh, you're so good with words and this or that. But it just, I don't think that's for me. And so anyway, I've had 6 children. They're all grown. Had lots of children through foster care, and all of that's over. And I was, okay, God, I'm 55. Now what? And he says, well, how about writing? And I'm like, how about no? And you know how God is. He always wins. So I finally acquiesced, and I said, okay, if this is what you're calling me to do, this is what I'll do. And I'm still feel like I'm in the infant stages of this. I was blessed to win 3rd place from the Ohio Writers Conference in the Bible study devotional genre. And I was about ready to throw in the towel and say, just sorry, God, this just isn't working. And then I won 3rd place. And so that was that little nugget that he gave me to help me keep going. Sorry. Today is one of those nuggets, y'all. Thank you for sharing your stories. Anyway, so I'm still waiting. I thought I was going to get to write fiction because I love romantic suspense. That's what I go to. That's my go-to. So far that hasn't happened. Everything God has used of mine has been nonfiction, inspirational. So there you have it. So when people ask me, well, what do you write? I was kind of like, well, I don't know. I wanted to do this, but at the moment God has me doing this, and I don't know what's next. And so I guess being called in a little bit later in life and not knowing exactly what I'm doing. And as most of us women, we like to be in control, right? And make things work the way they're supposed to. And this is easy, and it isn't. And this is something that is so brand new to me. I can't say brand new. It's been 4 years since God called me, and I kind of dabbled and I wasn't sure. And then I joined the Jerry Jenkins Writers Guild. I thought that's going to be my first big step. And that's where I met Melissa, and I met Rachel Colby and a group of lovely ladies. And they invited me to be a part of their group. And the name of their group at that time was Moms by Day, Writers by Night. And I said, well, my mom and days are kind of starting almost over. But then there was a group of 10 of us that broke away from that. And we call ourselves the Faith Writing Warrior Sisters. And so there's such an encouragement, and we encourage each other along the journey, along the way. And anyway, so that's where I am. That's my little bit of a story. And I don't know what God's going to do. It'll be interesting.
God likes to surprise us. God likes to surprise us. That's something that I'm hearing in all these stories.
Yes.
We don't know the end, but all we can do is the next right step that He's calling to us. And I think you guys have all shown that about how we take these steps in faith and obedience, and we step out, and something appears. Those nuggets appear. The next light, the next step appears. So.
I heard an author say one time, and his name has left me, but he said he wrote Draw the Circle.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I can't think of his name right now. But anyhow, he wrote, God always has a surprise up His holy sleeve. And I like that. I have that written on my old laptop, and I got to peel it off and put it on my new one. And so I like that, because He always has something for us when we least expect it, but usually when we need it the most. And so I'm loving the journey. I've met so many wonderful people. Y'all are just such a great encouragement to me. I just love this community, and even when I'm doubting or I'm not walking in obedience, y'all encourage me and help me to get back on track. And I just want to say thank you, and thank you for your support and the opportunity to do this today. I just think it's great.
And the stories have been so really cool. We've got about 20 minutes left. Why don't we ask the 5 of us that are here, Norma, does anybody else have something else they want to add to their story? And then we can invite the others in. Does that sound like
that sounds great? Anybody want to add anything?
Johnny, Melissa, anything you want to add real quick?
Yeah, I do real quick. I love what Norma was saying about being part of that group, and I know Melissa's part of that group too, because I think that was so important for Jeannie and me as well. Mm-hmm. Even though we've taken such different directions in our writing, with her, she abhors fiction. That's a little strong, but anyway.
No, it's probably close.
But meeting her at that 2007 conference, and we met. There were 5 of us all together that met and created a critique group, and really didn't know much about critique groups or anything at that time. And I don't know, it was another milestone for me too. It just made such a difference to have that group and that support. And even though we've really gone separate ways, as writers, we're just such still good friends. This is like 12 years later, and those friendships are so strong and so important to each of us in that group. So, if you're not in a critique group or a writing group of some kind, I just think that it's so important but you're part of Writers Chat community. And so here we are, you've got the people, if you're watching the replay and you're not part of a writers group, find one that fits you, a supportive writing group that fits you, because it's going to make so much difference. Word Weavers is great. Yes, Word Weavers is a wonderful organization. Shout out to American Christian Fiction Writers too, because they, there are different chapters throughout the United States. And I think there's an international online group as well. So, just connect with other writers. They get you.
They speak our language.
Yes.
They understand on that. The one little thing I thought about is that I mentioned the spiritual practices I do, and one of them is going on silent retreats. Yeah, I'm shut up for 3, 4, 5 days. And last year I did an 8-day silent retreat. Life-changing. It was life-changing. And I will do another long one probably this August. But yeah, Rhonda said she needed duct tape. A little hard. But anyway, what I really heard God say on that retreat and discovered something very core about myself as a writer is at the end of those 8 days, I knew this is how I say it, I cannot not write.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That there is that is part of me to play with the words and put words in different orders and try to write. So I cannot not write. And that was real life-changing for me to hear that from God and realize that about myself. So that was something else on my writer's journey. I don't know if Dan or Melissa have something else to add.
One of the things God used to confirm to me that I'm supposed to write is everything I see a story anymore. Like there's a truck parked across the street from my house with this metal trunk in it that's all ratcheted down. And every time I go by it, my mind is just spinning. One time we had been at the beach, my youngest son and I, and we were sitting at this restaurant right on the ocean, and right through the door I could see a boat had come in, a professional boat, and they're unloading this huge load of fish. And my mind starts wheeling with this story. And all the way home, I dictated it into my phone as I'm driving 4 hours, whatever it was, home. And then 2 weeks later, my phone crashed. and I lost my story. I was crushed. I felt like my baby was taken from me, and I have not gotten the strength yet to try to, because it was all so fresh. So my goal this summer is to go back, eat at that same place, hopefully catch the fishermen, and see if God will recreate that story. But I mean, for like over an hour, I was just talking into my phone, recording all the thoughts that were flying in my head. So I spoke with one of the gentlemen, and again, his name has left me. He was on Writers Chat and offered us a free 10-minute meeting with him.
Jim Rubart?
Yes. And I asked him, I said, well, what advice would you give a writer, a beginning writer? Phil just called into this a few years ago. He goes, well, go to Walmart. I'm thinking, go to Walmart, buy a pair of sneakers, and run away as fast as you can. And I said, well, and then I told him the fish story thing. And he said, too late, you're hooked. Sorry, don't go to Walmart and buy those shoes. So, it's a journey. It is a marathon, is I guess what I would say, and what God is teaching me. This isn't a sprint. It's not gonna all be over tomorrow. So, but I want it now.
Yeah,
God's teaching me, be patient, my dear.
Norma, I think you are a storyteller. Just how you've captivated us today. One of the stories you've told. Why don't we're getting shorter on time. Why don't if we see if Jan and Melissa want to add anything, and we'll invite everybody to come on back in, and we'll wrap up in the last couple minutes here. People may want to put an addition in, and we say every week, if you can't bring your video back, please put it in the chat, because sometimes if we take you off, you can't come back in unless we release you from that prison there. So Jan or Melissa, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I'd like to say God's nudging me to write some more again. I went through a period where I just felt like it was just put everything aside and just give yourself some time to rest. The social media was getting too overwhelming and stuff. And the last 2 weeks, I've edited 6 chapters now in my book on Esther to update it before re-release. And today he told me I'm supposed to get the quilting book back out and start writing some more on that, getting it ready. So it's kind of awesome the way he does things. That there is a time for rest, but then, okay, rest is over, start working some more.
Wow. Welcome, everybody. Get everybody back in. Norma, do you have anything you want to ask, or as people come back in, or add, or Melissa, anything?
Well, I would just ask if anybody has a real quick, almost elevator pitch kind of thing, as we hear so often, of how God brought you into writing, so that we have time for several people to share here in these last 10, 12 minutes. Anybody else want to share? Did God do something extra special?
I got a quick one, if you want to hear it.
Yes.
God used Jerry B. Jenkins to draw me into writing. I came to faith through the Left Behind series.
Wow.
And okay, I'm going to start crying.
It's okay.
Anyway, yeah, and through the course of all of that, my husband was here for his last few months on Earth, and I was sending updates through emails, and God just used them unbelievably to hone the craft. And he told me, if I can use a book to draw you to me, why can't I use your writing to draw others to me too? So that's how mine got started, and that's why it continues.
That is great,
Yeah.
Lisa. What do you write, Lisa?
who was it that said they write a little bit of everything? A little bit of everything. I started off with nonfiction, and now I'm going into suspense. So
okay,
yeah,
awesome. And congratulations, by the way, on being a finalist, semi-finalist.
Thank you.
Yeah, great story. Anybody else have something really neat or just a special way that God made it clear that this is what He has for you?
I'll share quickly. When I was in college, I was part of a group of 17 students in my class that got to skip the grammar and introductory English classes and go straight into writing. And it was a creative writing class. And my professor, he would choose one paper to read, and then we would talk about it. We all were writing, and he often chose my paper. And then one day he called me, he wanted to set an appointment. He wanted me to come to his office. And I'm like, uh-oh, what have I done? But he came in and he looked at me and he said, young lady, and I was young then, you need always to write. You must always write. And that was, I hate to say, 40 years ago, but that never left me. And sometimes when God plants a seed in your heart, it takes a while for it to sprout and to grow and for you to really see any fruit from it. And I know that's been my journey. I always did write, but I'm writing, bulletin announcements and newsletters for articles and things like that. But it was always writing. And every time I sat down to write, I heard His voice in my head, and I still hear it. So thank God. I think it was Jeannie was saying how much she appreciates hearing that teachers, professors, educators can have a huge impact on our lives.
That's awesome. That is neat. And congratulations, Rhonda.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Norma, I'll share something.
Okay.
I'm one of those doubters, like, did God call me to do this, or did I just want to write? And He put the dream there a long time ago, and through a nonfiction book of Debbie Maycomber's, I learned that those gifts and dreams are sometimes what God has placed in your life. So I go back and forth. And Lisa put in the chat, Lisa Kibler, that I met her through a God-ordained appointment in the cafeteria line at the Blue Ridge Conference years ago. And He just made us fast friends, and she is my number one encourager next to my husband. But anyway, with all of the doubts, she encouraged me to go to the Florida conference, and I always go to Blue Ridge, but I've never been to the Florida conference. And Liz Curtis Higgs was the main speaker there this time, and she was wonderful. And as she talked, God just spoke to my heart. I can't explain it, but He confirmed that yes, He did call me to lay those doubts aside and write, because it's almost paralyzed me for years, back and forth. Maybe it's not God, maybe it is God. And then I won my first award ever in the article contest there. And Lisa looked at me and said, now will you believe all of us that you're supposed to write? And
she won first place. Don't let her miss telling you that. She won first place.
Thank you, Lisa.
Awesome.
But anyway, he's really brought me a long way. And hearing all of your stories today was so encouraging that there are times when we might not feel or know the call, but He comes back, and He's so good to encourage us. And so thank all of you for your encouragement as well.
What a great story, Jeannie. Thank you. And I hear even from those that are longtime writers and have many published books that sometimes they still struggle with doubt too. But I know it can be paralyzing at times, and I'm glad God doesn't get mad and say, okay, fine, you're done. But He continues to nurture us and gently push us. Come on, child, go. And so, good job. Congratulations. What a great story.
It's beautiful.
Hey, Norma.
Yeah.
Can I share a bit?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to go over to my paper because I think on paper. I wrote a little bit between the ages of 12 and 18 as a way of processing and coping with a very tumultuous life. My home life was crazy, and I wrote letters to God, which I burnt when I ran away, but I didn't know I was a writer. And through the years, there were like older women, like in church, who were mentors to me that sort of would tell me, "Oh, you have a way with words. You should write a book," and I would just laugh. I thought it was preposterous. And I'm one of those. It was a series of like events, and Jerry Jenkins was one of those who it just kept popping up on the screen on my computer, and I ended up watching one of his videos and joining his guild. It was his question, why do you, finding your voice, and the why of why you write, that sort of started to unlock stuff in me. And then I joined Jerry's guild and a writers group, my local writers group, which is secular, on the same night, which was crazy. And when I went there at the library, they asked 2 questions. Why do you write? And they talked about your voice. And I said, well, can I read you what I just wrote this week? So it was a crazy entry because it's all very Christian. It was just amazing. And they've been very receptive, even though it's a secular group. Serious Writer asked a question this week on Twitter. They asked, when did you first realize you wanted to be a writer? And my answer was, it wasn't so much a wanting as a drawing. Jesus said, follow me, and I did, because I wanted him. And this is where the road led, and I've embraced it. This is my calling. I didn't know I was a writer. Then an encounter in a field 4 years ago, and that moment under the starry winter sky when I knew, and I put on my calling. And that encounter in the field there was so much trauma going on in our lives and in our church. And I finally came to the end of myself, and God just called me aside into this field at the church where my kids took music lessons. The story is on my site one day in October. And I had this encounter with God, and I just cried out to him, and I felt I needed to write it down. And I did, my prayer, and then it just didn't stop. And finally it was like Jerry was saying, you need to have a website. And I was like, yeah, whatever. And finally it was like, what am I going to do with all of this? And so anyway, it's been a crazy 3 years, and I'm still learning, but I'm so grateful for the opportunity to write for God, and I'll say we had a Christmas story village just at the beginning, and I needed to fill this prop shop with stuff, and I didn't have enough artwork. So my husband's like, why don't you put some of your words on the wall? So I did. And this stranger walked in, and he was an artist, and said, you need to be published. And I started laughing. He's reading all my stuff. But it was an encouragement. And the next year he came back and then he yelled at me and said, the reason that artists don't go anywhere is because they're disorganized, and then stormed out of my shop. I was like, wait, come back. Let me argue with you. But he just vanished. And he's come back almost every year. Yes, now we finally met each other on a soccer field at a private school, because I was homeschooling, and so my son was playing for them, and I was like, you, and he was like, you. And he follows my blog now.
That's such a great story, Rachel. I love how God just uses different things to bring each of us on this journey. It's just so neat how everybody's story is a little different, and yet we're all in one form or fashion doing the same thing. We have just a couple minutes. Anybody else want to share real quick?
I can share.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually always loved writing poetry since I was little. And I remember when I heard The Night Before Christmas, I thought one day I'm going to write a story like that. So when my first trip to the Florida Christian Writers Conference was for poetry, and I can't remember her name right now, but she was there for poetry. And when they met in the auditorium the first time, they announced that one person was not going to be there. And she was the one, because of a snowstorm in Michigan, could not make it. I thought, oh no, what am I going to do? So I went to my room, I called my husband, and I told him, I said, I'm coming home in the morning. And he said, you're coming home, why? And I said, well, I came here for poetry, and she's not here. So there's nothing here for me. And he's like a man of wisdom. And he said, did God bring you there? And I'm like, yeah. He said, then who are you to tell God what you're going to do? And he said, don't you dare come home. He said, you get on your knees and you talk to God and you ask him what you're there for. So I was driving, I wasn't staying on property. So I was driving there in the morning, and the Lord asked me, sitting at a red light, what do you enjoy? What draws you to me? And I said, devotions in the morning. He said, then you go sit in the devotion class. And I didn't even know, all I knew was the upper room was there. And I had no idea who was leading it or anything about it. So I went and I sat in on the class. And it was, my mind is gone with names. It's not Susan King. It was before Susan King. It was, well, she was leading the class. If anyone remembers her name, let me know. So I sat in on her class, and she, every single day, we were there, 3 days. So she taught us one day adverbs, one day adjectives, told us to take one scripture and relate it to our life. So I did. So I took a story of what I was going through and a hardship in my life when I was in the hospital on Christmas Day once. And every night I'd go back to my hotel room and I'd work on it. And so when we left, on our last day, she said, if you want to give it to me, give it to me. And she said, if not, take it home, work on it, and then send it to me. So I decided to take it home and work on it some more. And then I sent it to her. I not only sent it to her, but she said it was going to be in the upper room. And I just couldn't believe it. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, the first thing I ever really submitted was allowed in the upper room. Not only that, they sent it to me like 2 months before. And so she sent me the book, and there I was with the book, and I'm looking through it. My husband's looking through it. I'm like, oh my gosh, here's the book. Here's the upper room. And we couldn't find it. And we got right down to the end. It was published on Christmas Day. So it was like just beyond anything I could imagine that not only was it published, but on such a special day that it was published on Christmas Day. So really showed me we don't know what we're called to do. God did. So,
Deb, what a great story. That is, God has just, all these, we should put all these together in a compilation thing and post it on, because we're out of time, and I'd love to hear everybody's story, because I'm sure everybody's, even if you don't think yours is a very powerful story, it will encourage the rest of us. So I don't know if that's something we could do, Johnny and Jeannie.
We'll come up with that. I'd love to. It's been so encouraging.
It really has. Y'all have been a blessing and
uplifting.
Very uplifting and encouraging on in a time where God's kind of taken me to the woodshed a little bit. And I was discouraged a bit. I'll just be honest, he has convicted me that I want the reward without the work. So I'm having to back up and kind of start again. And it's very humbling and very discouraging. So today, y'all have encouraged my heart a bunch. And I thank you for sharing your stories, and
thank you for leading us today. And we're going to be blessed to have Norma be part of the group again next week. And so while the recording's on, I do want, for those of you that are watching the replay, I do want to promote our topic for next week. We're going to talk about what's new in the blogging world. Several of us have blogs. In fact, a lot of us have blogs. Some of us do more blogging than others. But we're kind of talking about maybe some of the more recent changes in the last couple of years, things to be aware of. None of us are key experts. We're just going to kind of share some of our experiences and stuff next week. And so, especially those of you with blogs, be kind of thinking about what do you do different now than what you did maybe a few years ago? What's kind of an up-to-date thing? And we might do another kind of an open mic sharing of some of the blogging on that. And Norma's going to help lead that again next week, and we'll talk about that. And we'll invite you all to stay for the after party on that and join us on that way. And anything last minute, Johnny or Norma, to add as we quit the recording?
Hope to see you next week.
Hope to see you all next week. And thank you for recording today, Melissa. We'll let you stop the recording then. Thanks. See you guys next week. And please stay for the after party if you're here live.